Hello, this is Matt Janucki, and you're listening to Inside Men's Mental Health, brought to you by the Psych Sessions Podcast Network. Here we explore this thing called masculinity and its impact on men's mental health, relationships, and communities. We'll learn together through conversations with thought leaders, innovators, and industry experts. Our conversations will also help us understand how these experts became interested in men's mental health and the ways their journeys have made them who they are today. In this episode, I talk with Dr. Simon Rice, one of the world's experts on depression in men. In my conversation with Dr. Rice, we cover a lot of ground, including his journey from being a high school teacher to a psychologist, the story of how he became serendipitously interested in men's mental health work, and some of the most pressing issues he sees for men today. Enjoy. Welcome, Dr. Simon Rice. Glad to have you here today, and looking forward to the conversation. And Simon, maybe you can just take us through a little bit, the different things you do. You work in several different places, have several different roles, and so maybe just give us just a little overview of the different things you're up to right now.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Great to be on your show. Thanks for the work you're doing to spread the word around men's mental health.
Yeah,
It's an important area, and
yeah,
we
thanks, Simon.
need, yeah, we need the field to be growing. So my career trajectory, I actually started as a secondary school, high school teacher, and I taught in the classroom for a few years, in a few places throughout Australia and in Southeast Asia for a little while. And through that process, then recognized that psychology was always a passion, and it helped clarify my thinking that, yeah, that's really the field that I want to get into. So then embarked on some professional training in psychology. So that was a master's and a PhD. And then that took me unexpectedly into enjoying research much more than I had anticipated that I would. When I graduated, I started working clinically in youth mental health, and I've been at the organisation Orygen. Orygen's the National Centre of Excellence in Youth Mental Health in Melbourne, Australia. I've been there in various roles since I started as a student in 2010, and then got a job as a clinical case manager in 2011 in our youth mood disorders clinic, where we support young people and their families who are experiencing pretty severe mood disorder. And by pretty severe, it's typical for young people to come to us following a suicide attempt or very serious ongoing suicidal ideation. And we work in a multidisciplinary team to support them in an outpatient manner. And through that clinical linkage to Orygen, I became aware of lots of things that were happening through Orygen's research program, which spans a very wide array of mental health presentations for young people. And that was a great process, and opportunities were provided to lead and coordinate studies. And then I had the opportunity to start the Young Men's Mental Health Research Group, and also co-founded our research group in elite athlete mental health. So an overlap with my interest in young men's mental health there as well, and have recently been trying to set up a forensic youth mental health research team at our organisation. So that's a little snapshot of the work that I've been doing for some time.
Okay, that's great, Simon. I appreciate it. That's helpful because now I have about, 25 questions to ask you all about, your snapshot there, but super helpful. I think one thing that I want to ask about is you said you started as a teacher. I think you said a high school teacher, right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about like that being a teacher and then the transition to psychology. Like, how did that come about where you decided that you wanted to, embark on journey as a psychologist? Maybe you can just break that down for us a little more.
Yeah, it might have sounded like it was a kind of 180-degree turn. It
Yeah.
wasn't so much because my undergraduate degree, I studied a Bachelor of Behavioral Science
Okay.
and had a strong background in psychology, and through that ended up teaching psychology at senior levels in high school
Mm-hmm.
here. So we offer that as a subject in some states in Australia. And I was teaching other bits and pieces as well, a bit of maths and science. And, depending on where you're working, you might get roped in to do some other subjects that you're not necessarily great at.
Yep, yep, that
one
sounds
that
about
I
right.
got, yeah, one that I did get roped into for a semester. No, it was a semester or a term, I can't recall, but it was year 10 PE. And, I've got an interest in sport and
Yeah.
staying fit. So that was fine. But the sport that they were doing through that particular period of time was tennis. And it was horrendously embarrassing trying to demonstrate how to serve in tennis when you don't know how to serve yourself. So that was definitely a fail, and I somehow managed to get my way through that.
Yeah, right.
Yes, so having a background in psychology, getting into teaching for a period of time, in my kind of late adolescent, early 20s, I always had an interest in following the path to become a psychologist. But when I graduated, I felt pretty young, and I was pretty young, didn't really feel ready to embark on that career step. And so teaching was a nice way of doing something very human focused because, as a high school teacher, you're interacting with so many people
Yeah, yeah.
on a daily basis. And so that was fascinating. And then it felt ready to embark on what turned into another 6 years of study. So in Australia, you have to do most pathways a fourth year, so an honours degree, and then what's usually 2 years masters, and then at least 3 years, usually 3.5 or 4 years for PhD. And so at the end of that, then I was well and truly ready to get out into the wide world and do some stuff again.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have a model for that? Like people in your family had folks in your family gone to graduate school, advanced studies, things like that. Did you kind of know the ropes for that, or was that new for you?
I didn't know the ropes. First generation going through tertiary university education within
Okay.
my family. So my mum had studied um, at at a post secondary level, but not quite in a university setting.
Okay.
So it was new to me, and a lot of it was really exciting. Um, and especially when I started, embarked on masters and PhD, was fortunate to have an extraordinary mentor, and that just made the world of difference. And I guess, like so many of us, you can look back at those inflection points in life where you encounter people who have a profound influence on your direction and belief in self and
Absolutely.
ambition for things that you can be a bit greater than you thought you could otherwise be. So I'm definitely fortunate to have had quite a number of those people at different phases and stages.
Yeah, I'm just curious about that, with my own, excuse me, my own students, those students who they're first generation college students or f- first in their family to go off to graduate school. Those are the students who sometimes can just really struggle to know, what do I do? How do I find the right information? How do I apply? How do I take the right tests and things like that? And so it can be really overwhelming for them. And so yeah, just kind of curious about that for you because clearly you did it and you've been successful. And so, but it sounds like for you that mentorship piece was really important for you. And you said the excitement was an exciting, sounds like journey for you too.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating thinking back because, first, second, and third year university, the the the, the focus on the scientific method within psychology and inferential statistics that pushed me out of my comfort zone. And for whatever reason, that some of those concepts didn't come neatly or easily,
Hmm.
um, it, and probably there were phases there where motivation wasn't as strong as it could have been, and enjoyment for the work wasn't always as strong as it could have been. But then something really shifted. Fast forward 7 or 8 years down the track, and in my master's and PhD course, I couldn't get enough,
Mm.
and it, I just wanted to be involved and doing things related to the field, and keeping tabs on advances, and just being connected to the work, um, and then the process of discovering this then, and it's still now, but very much back then. We're kind of talking 2006, 2007, very much an emerging field around men's mental health. That was phenomenally exciting, and I knew then and there, as I was really at the very early phases of trying to work out what my PhD topic was going to be. I knew what it was going to be once I read a particular paper. I still remember that moment very clearly, and then I was off and have been researching things closely connected to that for a very long time now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I want to come back to the men's mental health piece here in just a minute because I maybe have like a maybe not exactly similar moment, but at least a similar piece of kind of clearly getting that topic and you're right, that crystallization component, right, of this is what I want to do, this is what I want to study. And so I'm curious to hear that for you. But I would really appreciated your process there, Simon, with talking about it sounded like as an undergraduate struggling with statistics, as in just it didn't come easily. It's something you had to kind of work at to grasp. And I think a lot of my students, a lot of our students, as undergraduate psychology majors, they struggle with that. Like, why am I doing this? What's the purpose? How does this matter? And then, I appreciated you talking about a bit later down the road, really grasping the value of it and then really becoming interested in it, intrigued by it. And when I think of your work, right, the quality of the methodology and statistics and analyses and things like that. And so that's cool to see you go from, I don't know about this, this is really challenging, to like somebody who's, top of your field. So I appreciated you talking about that.
Oh, that's kind of you to say. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, that there were some challenging years, and I knew I wasn't alone in that. Like many peers were going through some of those same challenges, and um, in in the density of some of the statistical theory
Mm.
just not really
Hmm.
resonating. And so often that was about um, a, not having something to hook it onto or connect it to.
Yeah.
And then when I started doing my own research, so in fourth year, doing a big fourth year project, that was a light bulb moment. It's like, okay, now I've got something that I need to apply this theory and these techniques to. Um, and a lot is hinging on it because I've invested a lot into doing well this year so I can
Sure.
get into a postgrad course. So by that stage, I was highly motivated and could see the value in using these things as tools, and um, seeing them as nothing more and nothing less than tools to understand the data that you've got so you can answer the
Yeah.
interesting research questions that you're grappling with. So it was a reorientation of the usefulness, and that was helpful.
Yeah. I appreciate that. So when in the process was this before your dissertation, or was it at that moment? When did you become interested in men's issues, men's mental health? Was this earlier in, but kind of before your doctoral studies, or was it during your doctoral studies? When did that become something on your radar, Simon?
I think it was on my radar for a long time, just a recognition that there's something within our culture or cultures
Yeah.
that makes it particularly challenging for men to have the kind of conversations that can be really supportive and useful for their mental health, and being interested about what's going on there. And there's so much wrapped up in that statement alone around norms and expectations and socialization and, depending on your perspective, threads of biology, and being really interested to try and tease some of those things apart. And that, that's work that will continue to go on for a long time because it's complicated
Yeah.
stuff. And it becomes the intersection of psychiatry and psychology and mental health and sociology and cultural studies and media studies and all of those areas combined, plus others. So that that keeps the work very fascinating, but it also means that it's really challenging to kind of pin some of these things down.
Yeah. So, that's it. Sounds like those are some of the things that were on your mind. What during your? I'm kind of curious for you. For me, as an undergraduate, I had a professor who was kind of interested in men's mental health and had been involved like in APA, American Psych Association, and some issues around men's health and Division 51, and he just began to talk about it, and as he talked about some things around men's struggles to express their emotion, how the results and challenges for them, really just began to talk about just men as gendered people. It really clicked with me, and then it clicked with me around just guys that I knew and guys that I had experienced in my family and friends and the place that I grew up. And it kind of just it put some things in place and it framed some things for me. And I really knew kind of from then, I wanted to, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to make this a part of my career and my future. I wanted to learn more about this and study it and make a difference. And kind of wondering for you, like when did maybe things you get some clarity around like men's mental health? Was it something that was kind of really on purpose, or was it something that kind of happened maybe out of nowhere? When did things become more into focus for you?
I mentioned before that at those key years in my master's and PhD, I had a great mentor. So um, Barry Fallon was a professor in our department and took an interest in trying to convince me to do a PhD with him,
Okay.
which initially I was a bit skeptical about because I I just wanted to get out and apply myself and kind of earn a bit more money and get on with life. And as we would have conversations over time, because he offered me a job to be his research assistant a couple of days a week, I just became fascinated in the way he thought about the world. And he'd done some research, some early research, just building in ideas around masculinity and femininity using BEM sex role
Yeah.
inventory,
Yeah.
which it was one of the early ways of measuring some of those constructs. And so he thought carefully about some of these things, and as we just had conversations, just things were threads were kind of becoming a bit clearer to me in my mind. And then a colleague gave me a paper that he thought was interesting, and it was by researchers in Sweden who had
Mm-hmm.
developed a new scale to
Mm-hmm.
assess depression in men, and that was born out of work that they'd done over a long time in understanding gender differences in a particular area of Sweden called Gotland, which is an island, and recognizing that, like many countries throughout the world, men were highly overrepresented, but also when they dug into the psychological autopsies of men who had died by suicide, there was a recognition that many of them were known to medical services, to health services, but they weren't being identified as having a mood disorder or being at risk of um, depression or suicide. And they thought that there might be something around the socialization in that part of the world, around masculinity norms and men not feeling comfortable expressing and showing vulnerability that might change the presentation of depression. So they developed a tool to assess that. And only a brief paper, I remember reading and thinking, this is really interesting. This is where a whole bunch of things are kind of colliding. and that's become a key focus of my work ever since reading that paper.
Yeah. Yeah, so you read that Gotland paper, and that's something that really intrigued you, and that's interesting to learn the beginning of this journey for you to study depression in men.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd had a few conversations with Barry, my supervisor, uh, just around psychometrics because he'd done a fair bit of
Yeah,
psychometric type work, and I knew enough to know that some of the items in that scale were just not well presented, constructed, or written. And kudos to that team for really founding a new line of research. If it wasn't for them and me reading that paper, I don't know what I'd be doing today. It might have would have ended up on a very different trajectory, I suspect. But I also recognise this is a fascinating area. But I could see that there are already problems with this scale. There was one particular item that was very long-winded in its wording and assessed 5 different constructs. And for even someone with just very limited knowledge of psychometrics, you get a sense, well, if someone's endorsing that item, saying, you know, every day or a couple of times a week, which part of those 5 parts are they actually endorsing? You don't know. So it's the measurement aspect needed to be tightened up. And that led me to the work that I did for my PhD on developing a different scale, a new scale, and that scale's now being widely used and in various different ways.
yeah. You know what I, excuse me, what I just love about that story, Simon, is I love to hear kind of just the backstory, and I think what I love about that is when you said like who would have known, right? Like if these kind of circumstances aligned, right, where you're working with this mentor and he hands you this paper and says, "Hey, you should read this. You should look at this," and it kind of intrigues you, and when I think of your work, that's certainly one of you've done a lot, right? But that's one major way, right, that you've impacted the world of men's health is through the masculine depression risk scale, right? And so this one thing, these things that kind of aligned, right, for you to do the work that you've done, and I think that's just interesting to hear about that and hear a little bit more about that story. So that's really cool for me.
Well, yeah, thanks, Matt. I think the key word for me and what you said there was alignment. And when, from time to time, earlier career researchers might have a conversation with me around, how can I best position myself for success and to get from A to B to C. And my advice is pretty consistent that the importance of showing up, and that can take, you can interpret that in lots of different ways. But
Yeah.
when I talk about showing up, I mean, being there, being interested. If you've got a growing interest in something, then chase that, follow it, read what you can, reach out to people, go to seminars, get linked in with an association or a group that might be doing that kind of
Mm.
stuff. And it sounds a bit cosmic, but the universe then um, the universe can't help but get out of its way to create opportunities. And I guess I'm not saying that in the sense that you know that we have a pre-programmed destiny. I don't believe that we have so much agency and choice. But you've got to use that agency and choice, in a really deliberative way. To give an example, when I first started working in research at Orygen, the National Centre of Excellence in Youth Mental Health, at the time I was a clinician, and I'd finished my PhD, and I was really keen to get a foot in the door in the research centre, but I didn't know anything about it. I kind of I had a vague connection and was having conversations with him. So his name Mario Alvarez, and Mario has been a really important mentor as well over the years. But I didn't know how to get a job within the research centre, and the research centre was pretty big. Like at then, it was probably about 200 people. So I just, I rocked up to things, and I had heard that there was a going away event for a psychiatrist who was leaving, and I didn't really know the psychiatrist very well, but I just thought, oh, you know what, I'll just go. Like, it was at a pub, and it wasn't like I was crashing a private thing. And I walked in and was like, okay, well, I've got to meet people and introduce myself. And there was a face that I knew, but I didn't know his name. So I just went up and said, oh, hi, my name's Simon Rice. And he said, oh, my name's Paul. And Paul, is Austrian. And we got to chatting, and I said, oh, Paul, I'm going to the bar. Can I get you a beer? And he said, yes, please, get me a beer. So I bring Paul back a beer. And we got to chatting for about 5 or 6 minutes, and I was asking him a few questions. And then he said, oh, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm a clinician and I really love it. I work in our mood disorders clinic, but I really do want to start to do some research as well. And he said, would you like to work with me on one of my projects? And I said, yes, what's your projects? And,
Uh,
6 weeks later, I was working in a research role coordinating one of his studies. And I tell that story just as an example of just showing up, and things happen. If I hadn't have rocked up to that going away drinks and had that chance conversation with an Austrian psychiatrist who I really didn't know, then would I have ended up working in research at Orygen and been able to do what I've been able to do? I don't know. So those sliding door moments, but chasing those areas of interest and passion, um, it's always been a successful strategy for me. And I guess not I don't say that in the sense that making it super strategic or Machiavellian at all, but just following the things that you're interested in until you're not interested in them anymore. And that may happen or it may not happen. And if it doesn't happen, you'll just get more and more interested in them and more curious, and some fascinating things can evolve.
yeah, I appreciate that. The sliding door moments are just those small moments, right, that can lead to opportunities, right? But also being open to those and being active, right, and seeking those out. That's a great story, Simon. I appreciate that. I think I want to follow up on a piece of that. You said I can't remember your words exactly, but you were talking about something to the extent of pursuing these things that you're passionate about, that you're interested in, until you don't want to do them anymore. Just it seems like something of being open to new things and other things. And when I've looked at the work that you're up to, certainly I know your work for of course the work you've done for some time now in men's mental health that intersects with mine around depression and suicide risk, et cetera. But then I also see that you're up to other things. You're doing work with elite athletes, mental health, and things like that. And so I don't know if that intersects there, where you're like, well, I'm kind of interested and curious about other things, or maybe that was another opportunity that came your way. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about how your interests have opened up and gone on to new things. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, great point. One of the probably challenges in the way that my mind works is that I'm interested in lots of stuff.
Okay.
And there's probably 4 or 5 or 6 different areas that I've published in over uh, 15 or so years. And that eh, eh, that's become a difficult narrative to sell in Australia for our major um, funding body in health and medical research, the National Health and Medical Research Council, because we've had a recent move around, as many institutions, funding institutions have globally, a move around demonstrating impact
Yep.
in being able to secure funding for your salary into the future. And the way in which the NHMRC has decided that the assessment needs to take place is that um, around demonstrating impact, there needs to be a case study of one key area of research that you have been able to shift the field in. And if you have a whole bunch of areas of research, it means that impact is spread across those different areas.
Yeah.
And I've found it increasingly challenging to write those sections because, to your point, I have done work in young men's and men's mental health, and a lot of that. I've done a fair bit of work in athlete mental health. I've done work in broader suicide prevention. I've done some organisational work. I've done youth depression work. So across and also significant work in digital mental health interventions. Trying to unify those fields, it's impossible because you've got a very limited number of characters. So it's not necessarily something I would recommend early career researchers follow, that kind of broad, disparate path if you're wanting to be highly competitive in funding schemes, at least in Australia, because there's been a real interest in wanting to focus in on a narrow range of really deep experience in one very specific area. So that's how the NHMRC has decided to go, and that's over time that's become a frustration for me because that's not been my career experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes it more challenging for someone like you.
Yep.
But it certainly looks like your interests have focused. Maybe I don't know if that's the right word. You can tell me increasingly so, or certainly significantly so in areas like athlete mental health. It seems like something you're focusing quite a bit of time, and you've been involved with things like in again, you'll have to correct me, but Australia or maybe more broadly with Olympic athletes. I wonder if you can maybe just talk a little bit more about that. I'm kind of curious to hear a little bit more about that work.
It was fairly fortuitous, which I think so much, so many great things in the world of research and science end up being fortuitous. But we had been doing a large project with a number of elite sporting codes here in Australia around understanding the prevalence of mental ill health. And through that work, we undertook a systematic review. And so now we're kind of going back to 2014, 15 era here. And we'd put a lot of time into the review, and it was just obvious to me that it would be a complete waste if that paper wasn't published. At the time, there's very little consolidated info available on athlete mental health. And so that systematic review, unexpectedly to us, has kind of become the foundational paper for the field. It was published in 2016 in Sports Medicine. It's had over 1,100 citations on Google Scholar, which, for a mental health paper is quite a lot in a
Absolutely.
relatively short amount of time. So we've been really fortunate. And then that created its own weather system. And we were fortunate enough to get more work in a consultancy sense to sports, providing advice and more research. That linked us into what was happening internationally with the IOC, the International Olympic Committee's expert consensus group on mental health, and the IOC's interest in wanting to further these concepts at a global level. And then through that linkage and that consensus statement, that the momentum has grown, and we've really benefited from bringing some areas of strength that we have in youth mental health, because the youth mental health framework and the years when we talk about youth mental health, we're really talking about the years somewhere between 12 and 15 through to 25, maybe up to 30. Well, they overlap perfectly with the years of elite peak competitive performance. So if an athlete is going to experience a mental health challenge, it's going to be within those years, because that's when most of the onset of mental ill health occurs for the first time. So there was just some expertise and some knowledge that we were able to bring from the models that Orygen was able to set up, and also some specific thinking, around culture, around masculinity when it comes to men's mental health in the elite athlete population. But even beyond that, there are many cultures within female elite sport that the coaching system, management administration is very male dominated, and there can still be a masculine type culture within female sport, even though female athletes can still and will identify in many instances as being very feminine. So, we're talking about ideas of mental toughness
Sure.
and being very stoic and getting the job done. And the ruthlessness around elite sport, because the amount of competitive money that's involved and
Yeah.
all of those factors. So it's been a really interesting space to play in.
Yeah, and that's interesting to talk about again, kind of this piece of just the serendipitous component of things, right? Where you said that you worked together on this paper and the paper just really opened up this opportunity, right, to do this work. And so really cool to hear about just another opportunity, right, where you see this opportunity, you take the opportunity, and it's really opened up a new line of work. And so really interesting to hear that, right? Just another kind of place where, right, the door slid, right? And you really were able to do some interesting work, continue to do this interesting work. So cool to hear that.
Yeah, it's tricky because I think in that earlier and mid-career phase, taking each and all opportunity that you can is so important. And then as time unfolds, you have to start to be more judicious around where
Mhm.
you want to focus your time and your energy because you can't do everything all the time. And but definitely encourage people to explore things, new collaborations, new research lines of research, and if you can find a gap in a field, one thing I always say to my students, well, write a piece about it. It doesn't have to be a data-driven piece. It could be a commentary piece, a perspective piece, letter to the editor, and things can happen from those kind of pieces. And it will clarify your thinking, the process of writing, and then through peer review, it will improve your thinking as well, most of the time.
So do you feel like you're in that place now? You said you would encourage that for like early career, mid-career researchers. Do you feel like you're in that place now where you're saying, all right, I'm going to really be kind of thoughtful and really be kind of choosy about what I want to do and really hone that in? You feel like you're more in that space now as a full professor?
Well, I think as your career unfolds, and with the passing of time, the onus is on more senior people in the field to be supports to the next
Mm,
generation.
mhm,
And um, I, I feel a great sense of gratitude because I get a real buzz out of supporting other people and especially earlier career researchers achieve things and do things that they didn't think that they could do
mm,
and you know find new discoveries and publish great work and have that noticed. That's a fantastic thing. That's a key part of why I find research such a great thing to be connected to. Um, so giving back and stewardship of the field and growing the field, I see that as really critical.
yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that. Excuse me, Simon. I'm wondering what, like, and you can frame this however you like, whether you want to frame this question primarily around your context in Australia. You can think about this more broadly, and you have familiarity with your work around Australia, Canada, US, from your writing in masculinity, and there's differences, but there's also overlap. But I was curious, from where you sit in the work that you've done, what do you think are some of the most pressing concerns? And you can think about this, maybe it's research, what researchers need to do to kind of do to help men and help men's mental health. Maybe it could be just more just broadly, just culturally, right? But I'm just kind of wondering where you sit. What do you think are some of the challenges, the problems that we still need to solve and help men with? And again, you can think again Australia, you can think broadly, here in the West. I'm kind of curious what are some of the things that pop up for you that are still things we need to do to help men and assist them with their mental health?
Well, I think we're fortunate now that there's an interest in I was going to say, movement of sorts where many men are clearly wanting to be able to connect and relate in
Yeah.
different kinds of ways. Um, and there's a generational component to that, but that's it's not that straightforward. In some of the work that we've done over the years, when we're comparing ratings on, masculinity inventories across different kind of age cohorts, it's not uncommon for younger men to be holding more rigid and stereotypical ideas around masculinity, and some of those to be associated with poorer health and mental health outcomes. And that for those attitudes to kind of attenuate across different generational kind of cohorts. And the
Yeah.
differences aren't necessarily huge, but they're there nonetheless. I think we need to get a much better understanding of what it is for young men in particular that's making it hard, and an expectation that they have to be X, Y, and Z
Mm.
to be seen as manly or have a sense of manhood or be a man. There's real opportunity to to for us to be applying better measurement in ways that's kind of country and culturally specific, um, and to do that in ways that we can actually start to link health outcomes in a more clear way, or at least understand what the links are. Um, there's a segment, obviously, of men and young men in particular who are being allured by, caught up
Mm.
in corners of the web that aren't necessarily great for their health and their mental health. We're in an era now where social media influencers can have a profound impact on many people, and that can be really positive through to not so positive. And understanding again what are the hooks around some of that communication. What is it that young men might be needing or lacking or yearning for that they're not getting in their offline worlds through connection to family, culture, society, that are leading them down some of those paths? Because there can be really problematic outcomes, and on the extreme end, they can be very drastically negative outcomes. And as we have more conversations around gender equity and gender equality, that has to be part of our a deepening of our understanding around what's going on around some pockets of men's and young men's mental health, around misogynistic attitudes. And it's not just in a gender relations component. It can be problematic around race, culture,
Sure.
and class and other things. But what is it that people are being enticed by some of these more problematic messages that are unlikely to lead them to the kind of life and fulfillment that they're really wanting?
Have you seen some examples of like a good alternative, like an alternative, like this is a space, healthy masculinities to kind of pull guys in, and this may be something we can have this on the podcast or not, but I'm just kind of curious if that's something where you've seen like I like this. I think this is something that could really kind of hook guys. You've used that metaphor, be an alternative that kind of meets the needs where they're looking for clarity and kind of structure, vision for what masculinity looks like, but it's different. I'm just curious if you've seen some things that appeal to you.
Yeah. Where things get difficult with the online world, with social media, is that too often the positive, useful, um, beneficial, healthy content is way deprioritized in the algorithm.
Yeah,
So
totally.
the algorithm knows that that's not going to generate clicks. So why would make its way into people's feeds? Well, it
Yeah.
will if people watch a lot of that stuff, then that's what the algorithm learns is going to be sticky and keep them connected to the site. So it's a battle for the more balanced stuff to make it through, because that's
Sure.
not the way in which um, clicks are organized in terms
Yeah.
of our sensational world.
Yeah.
So there will be plenty of good stuff, but how to make it pop up and noticeable
Yeah.
um, is part of the challenge.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, Simon. I appreciate that you had to make it break through, right? The algorithms that prioritize the sensational negative uh, stuff.
And
Well,
I
oh,
think
go ahead. Sorry.
I think yeah, a greater sense of sophistication is going to be needed um, to combat this, and um, to be able to get the information that we need. We're going to be have to, collecting really useful data. So um, I think there'll be some fascinating work done in years to come, in the coming years, around what what is it that is really keeping young men in particular hooked to
Mm,
some of this content.
yeah.
How how invested are they getting? Where do they see that it's useful versus problematic? Um, and to do that in a way that's not labeling or shaming of
Yeah.
them, so that they can feel comfortable to share honestly and openly, so that we can better understand what's going on. An option, of course, is to come down in an extremely hard way and silence conversations. That's just going to push them further into the darkness. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um, just mindful that, in a world where there can be a tendency to want to do that, um, and for that to make understandable sense, that it's not necessarily the best way to go.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for thinking through that. So yeah, you can think if that's something that you would want to keep on here or not. But I was just kind of curious with following up on that a little bit. And so I appreciate it. So here, kind of as we get to the end of our time, Simon, here's what I imagine will be the case is that folks who listen to this probably there will be folks that I'll try and push this out to that are in our space, right? They know men's health and psychology of men and masculinities, but really my hope is that working with my colleague Eric on psych sessions is that this kind of moves this content out to some people who really don't know this field very well. And so
Mhm.
they may not really know, some of the important work or some of the literature, or some of the key thinkers and writers and some of the resources, right? And so I think it could be valuable for folks like you who talk some, of course, for them to know about you and your work, but also what's some work that's influenced you, some resources that you think are valuable, whether it's resources for research, for students, for just guys in their everyday life. And so that's why I think it could be valuable to share some of these things. And so curious for you, what are some of these resources? So are there just a couple things, whether it's thinkers that have really affected you, like your way that you think about men's mental health, or resources that you think could be valuable for folks who are thinking more about this space?
One of the challenges that we've got is that we really have to grow the field.
Yeah.
There has been a field of men's mental health scholarship for some time, but the scope and the size of the problem requires that field has to be much bigger, because we need to be a lot better at advocating to local government, state government, national government, internationally, to affect greater change. We we need to be better, I think, at creating stronger links within our research groups. And a great collaborator at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, John Olive, has been doing an amazing job of leading the Men's Health Research Centre there and bringing in many collaborators who are actively involved in intervention work in the men's mental health and young men's mental health spaces and men's health more broadly. There are many great thinkers who have written really foundational papers, and it won't take long for readers to start to get themselves into literature to recognize names that keep popping up. So
Yep.
I encourage people who are curious, just start reading papers, and yeah, you'll see the big name theorists, and they will become obvious to you. I think where internationally there's going to be great movement is the work that Movember is doing and will be doing into the future. Movember is the leading men's health charity globally. Movember has raised over 20 years an extraordinary amount of funding to support better men's health and men's mental health. Traditionally, areas of focus have been prostate and testicular cancer and increasingly mental health. And Movember is investing in a new men's health institute to bring scholars, policymakers, advocates together so that our collective impact can be much better in us raising the profile of men's health. Movember is going to be doing that in a very thoughtful way to include key partners and partners that haven't necessarily always been connected to men's health. And when I say that, I mean women's health
Yep.
organisations
Yep.
and linkages to the family and domestic violence sector. We all have a huge amount to gain in improving men's health and appraising domestic and family violence as a health issue for men, because these are men that by and large are not emotionally healthy, that don't have great emotion regulation skills. And I don't say that as a way to take responsibility away from men who are engaging in those kind of behaviours or to apologise or to excuse the behaviour. I mention it as a way to explain the behaviour and a potential mechanism to intervene, to provide skills and competencies that if they were better able to manage their emotions, and masculinity has a strong component and attitudes to gender have a strong component here, together, understanding how we can better integrate all of those facets for a better functioning society. So when we think about it, the mission of Movember really is about supporting men's health so that men can have better relationships and be better citizens, better family members, better members of society, and that everyone wins there.
That's perfect. That's such a perfect way to end. I appreciate that, Simon. Well, Simon, thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Have a good
Okay.
night. See ya.
Bye, Simon. You too. Bye bye.
Bye.